black ghetto of Buffalo, New York, erupted in violent rebellion.
Some of our policemen don't know how to treat Negroes. They treat them like they're animals and talk to them like they're animals.
The Buffalo public schools are unconstitutionally segregated.
We proclaim for ourselves every single right that belongs to a freeborn American. And until we get these rights, we will never cease to protest and assail the ears of America.
Those powerful words of W.E.B. Dubois marked the beginning of the organized civil rights movement 100 years ago, a national movement that started right here where I'm standing, on Michigan Avenue in Buffalo, the site of the home of Mary B. Talbert.
A lot of my culture, just my grounding, my personality comes from things that I was taught here.
Oppressed people need a strong, strong sense of history, traditional values.
Those values and history lessons are in many ways being taught, preserved, and nurtured through African culture and the arts. In order to build a strong community, many young African Americans are studying, embracing, and promoting their heritage with pride.
The promise of 100 years, the pride of a people. Rich Newberg and Milas Hairston present the roots of the civil rights movement and African Americans in Buffalo who have not forgotten their roots.
In 1905, a small group of African Americans with ideas that were considered radical back then came up with the term Niagara Movement. They had first met in Buffalo, not far from Niagara Falls, to begin a mighty current of protest they hoped would wash away the lines of racial division in our country. We feel more than just a ripple effect today, because many of the problems of 100 years ago still have not been washed away.
So don't give me that reform junk. I'm sorry I'm mad because my people are hurting.
It is the year 2005. Marchers in Buffalo address the hurt in the name of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They cry out to young blacks whose lives are being wasted or even ended in the streets, while also taking stock of the gains of 100 years of struggle.
We're more than drug dealers and prostitutes, but we're congressmen, my God, today. We're the next president. We're doctors and lawyers. God, give us a vision. God, touch the young people on the corner. God, give them a mind to want to give their life to doing what's right.
Many want to do what's right, but can't find work.
Me, I'm a cement finisher, and it's only seasonal, and you can't get a year-round job right now. And for me, that's bad, because now I got to sit back, collect unemployment and stuff like that.
African-American demonstrators in Buffalo in the 1960s made jobs the rallying cry when they descended on City Hall.
What is going to happen to the 15% unemployment in our ghetto areas? The door is always open, and we'll keep talking until we solve the problem.
But talking has not produced results, and to this day, not much has changed in the inner city.
We have moved forward, but we haven't taken that giant leap. But it is within our reach. The question is, will Buffalo grasp that opportunity, or will it be wide right again?
Opportunity for advancement can hinge on education, but inner city African-American children are having problems with the basics.
They got to be able to read. Reading is the first step towards freedom, justice, and equality.
There had been hope when Buffalo schools were ordered to desegregate following a long, hard civil rights battle.
For our part, we are now ready to forget the past and build a future with a peaceful transition to an integrated school system.
And it worked. And all the naysayers who said that, the schools were going to blow up, it was going to, not educate the children, they were all proven wrong.
We will examine the plan.
While the courts ordered change, some believe it was the rage and frustration that played out on the streets of Buffalo and other cities that forced the system to take notice. Assemblyman Arthur W.E.B. had won the Democratic nomination in his run for the mayor's office in Buffalo.
This city has demonstrated beyond the shadow of a doubt that people of goodwill will vote for a candidate regardless of race, color, or creed.
Jimmy Griffin would be victorious and fend off a later challenge by George Arthur. But African-American politicians would lead the city's Common Council and rise to positions of prominence within government. These kinds of political gains would have been wishful thinking 100 years ago. The turn of the 20th century and the coming of the Pan American Exposition presented a unique challenge to black civil rights leaders in Buffalo. While the wonders of electricity lit up the imagination, the old plantation exhibit on the Midway reinforced negative stereotypes of the African American, featuring contented slaves and referring to their children as pickaninnies. Buffalo civil rights leaders Mary Talbert and her pastor, the Reverend J. Edward Nash, protested and successfully brought the Negro exhibit to the expo, featuring the achievements of black writers and artists. 4 years later, the famed W.E.B. Dubois, with the help of Talbert and Nash, would assemble a group of activists who would challenge the nation to accept African Americans as equals, with their first meeting held at Mary Talbert's house.
The Declaration of Principles that call for immediate change in the status of African Americans. It called for voting rights. It called for access to education, equal access to education. It called for job opportunities for African Americans.
That gathering in Buffalo has been acknowledged as the beginning of the organized civil rights movement, but it did not get the support of Booker T. Washington, who was less demanding, advocating that blacks learn a trade and work within the white power structure.
As I understood my father, his concern was an attempt to bring W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington together. It didn't happen. They were hostile to each other.
This was the study. This was the study.
The late Reverend Nash's home is on its way to becoming a museum and research center. He left behind letters to Du Bois and Booker T. Washington and sitting presidents. His Michigan Street Baptist Church nearby, which once took in fugitive slaves, has also been preserved so people can see and touch authentic pieces of American history.
It is no small feat that Buffalo is still looked to as a center or a region that certainly something big could happen and that it should happen.
It is perhaps ironic that the place where the civil rights movement got its start is still struggling, but those at the forefront of the struggle can still point to great strides that have come out of that movement.
All of this is evolutionary. See, people first wanted to be able, yes, to ride any place on the bus. Then you wanted to have a job driving the bus. And then we're in this next stage where you want to have control over where that bus goes.
We will claim for ourselves every single right that belongs to a freeborn America.
Reverberating through the city, a culture, a community, a long way from Africa, a commitment.
And this is what we pass on to the children today. You know, it's about keeping our history alive, you know, remembering the sufferings that our people have experienced and what those sufferings have entitled us to today.
For nearly 5 decades, the African Cultural Center has been in the heart of Buffalo's East Side, and so has the heart of Africa.
The foundation of it in terms of making sure that the children are aware of their African history and American history as well, and the dancing and the performances and theater. That's a foundation that will be with us all the time.
Linda Barr started with the center when she was just 9 years old.
Always kept me with a positive mindset, being that they identified for me and helped me identify for myself that I was an important person in my community, in my family.
A state corrections officer for nearly 2 decades, Barr is back teaching African dance.
It's a basis to build self-esteem, social skills, you know, just to help us develop our communication skills altogether.
Dancing, an important part of the culture. It's vital in keeping the tradition alive and teaching history.
These are ways that our people communicated when they were in bondage, before all of this kind of was stripped away and we had to go dig back and find it.
Historically, the drum has been an important part of the culture. At one time, it was outlawed in the U.S. because slave owners feared its ability to bring Africans together. Determined to keep their heritage, Africans used whatever they could to try to recreate traditional instruments such as the shekere, rattle, and kimbe. The name of the dance is funga. It's a traditional African welcome dance. Every movement has meaning.
Each dance has a specific message or meaning. Most of the dances done in Africa are indigenous to things that go on in their society. Like they have birth ceremonies, rites of passage ceremonies, harvest dances.
Black History Month, the kids in school, they learn about the same people, which are great, but you know, the Rosa Parks and the Martin Luther King, there were other people in our history that have done a lot to also help us get to the point that we are today.
Getting to this point has been a struggle, and many people want to advance. That's why they say it's crucial for African Americans to place a greater emphasis on African heritage.
We are a culture of pride. We have moral values that keep us doing what we do.
For James Harris, drumming is not only a part of his life, it helps this 17-year-old understand his culture and the world.
Just like the world, things will hurt me, and it teaches me to become stronger and stronger every time I play, so the pain could go away.
I'm learning stories and what slavery was about and how they, like, different dances are about different subjects.
Indigo Turner is 12 years old. She says she's learned more than African dance in her 3 years at the Cultural Center.
I thought it was just dancing at first until I came, and then I realized that it was telling stories and teaching me something that I probably would have never learned.
Many people are learning African heritage is being preserved and promoted in places where people have passion, pride, and a commitment to culture and community.
Love is the pulse of society.
It's not just to do African American plays, it's also to provide African American artists with an opportunity to grow.
Lorna Hill is the founder of Ujima Theater. Ujima is Swahili for collective work. Here it's more than just performance, it's about responsibility.
It is unlike mainstream American theater because it's not just about preserving the ability to sing and dance and perform and build sets. It's about the ability to preserve a culture and ipso facto a people. African American theater, like any theater that is culturally specific, has that kind of onus on it, that kind of obligation.
Much of the work here is created by African Americans or reflects life in the community.
Oppressed people need a strong, strong sense of history, traditional values.
How come I got a hand for boosting? I don't got a hand for throwing the cards.
A rehearsal for the production, Top Dog, Underdog. The play focuses on two brothers, their relationship, and life.
You're not always going to come to the theater and, that was a great play, the song and dance. Sometimes you're going to get hit with a big dose of reality.
But then it goes right into a whole nother realm of making sure you can live and survive out here, you know? And so that's what may bring you through the door, but as soon as you get through the door, it becomes larger.
Larger than the pop culture prevalent in many parts of the community.
And the traditionalism of the African drum, that form of communication, the drum goes back past the slavery days to a form of letting people hear each other, talking. You would tap your drum depending on what was being said. In another area, they may gather the food and come and do that.
Yes, we're African Americans, but we're not truly African. So I think best that we have centers like these that teaches who our Africans are and how they have impacted our life.
It's another way of getting them to learn. If they can practice it and do it perform it, then I think it's easier for them to learn rather than to pick up a book and read it, or a teacher standing in front of them and dictating it to them.
And it appears to be working. Here, the Dunbar Project. It's named after African-American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar, who died in 1906 at the age of 33. Theater training, African tradition, and education are united.
I'm learning how to African dance and how to be in a production and how to speak clearly and pronounce your consonants. Learning Creole, how to speak a language, and learning about Black history. Most of my friends don't know much about their history, so I can teach them what they don't know so they can spread it on to other people.
Reverberating through the city, a culture, a community, a long way from Africa, a commitment.
When people turn to Arthur Eve, he turns to a higher source.
I have simply asked God to give me the strength, the wisdom, the guidance.
Joining in spirit with some of the greatest civil rights leaders of our time, Eve became a force that would bring hope and opportunity to those the system did not recognize.
People have to realize when you lift people up from the bottom, everybody is lifted up together.
During his 36 years in the New York State Assembly, it's been said that Arthur Eve started more education and jobs programs for the disadvantaged than any other state lawmaker in the country, opening doors of opportunity for future lawyers, judges, and lawmakers. But despite all the big government programs, inner city conditions in some respects have gotten worse, with neighborhoods held hostage by gun-wielding gang members.
It's more killing in the Black community. Killing. Yeah.
I never really thought at age 17 I would be shot.
When Eve's own grandson, Eric, took a bullet in the leg while walking with some friends, Arthur Eve's mission in life suddenly intensified.
I'm in the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning, Erie County Medical. They're operating and putting a rod in his leg, and I'm crying. And the Holy Spirit said to me, God, let that happen to your grandson so you can work even harder.
B, C, D, E. The former deputy speaker of the New York State Assembly will devote the rest of his life teaching young children how to read.
Once upon a time.
It's a program channeled through the faith community, designed to bring parent and child together, making reading fun and reversing a most disturbing trend in poor and marginal communities.
They tested the kindergarten children in the city of Buffalo. They lagged 2 years behind in oral language development. And so a lot of young people at the 5th grade level have developed a sense of awareness of their inability to function properly, and it develops a sense of hopelessness.
1, 2, 3, 10. Let's go.
As for Eric Eve, who was told he would never play basketball again, he's back on the court after having the rod removed from his leg.
This cereal is too hot, she said.
As for his grandfather, he's ready to help inner city kids also beat the odds, one word at a time.
She got in the little bed and fell fast asleep.
Sunday salvation at Buffalo's Bethel AME Church.
See, when the Lord says it, and if you believe it, you gotta move to receive it.
Answering the call, Bethel AME's mission is moving to the streets of the community.
I didn't see it being done by anyone else, so it left it to the church to take the leadership and to take that mantle to bring about change.
Here's what Reverend Stenhouse means when he talks about change. The home in this picture looks anything but inviting at Purdy Street and Elsie Place, now on that very same site, one of 8 new homes that are part of a multi-phase redevelopment. It's a partnership between the church and government.
We hope it will revitalize, draw interest, bring people back to the community, let people see that there is something good on the east side happening.
Now, some might call what's happening here a miracle. But the work of the church is not stopping with this housing development. In fact, it's just a small part of an East Side revival.
You gotta put your faith in action.
A daycare center will rise up on this vacant lot on Jefferson Avenue, serving the needs of 140 children. Also in 2005 on Jefferson, religion will move into retail with a business incubator for a half dozen entrepreneurs.
But we have been successful in raising all of the money necessary to build it, so we won't have a mortgage, so that we can offer them very low rent, below market rate rent.
Reverend Stenhouse remembers when this was a vibrant middle-class community. Many years have passed, but the mission of the church remains the same.
And I believe the church is mandated, black church especially, has been mandated to be holistic in the ministry, to provide for the total needs of the community.
A ministry working 7 days a week for the salvation of a community.
There is hope. There is opportunity out there. You may see empty lots, but empty lot is just an opportunity to build a building, to build a home.
The civil rights promise of 100 years has yet to be fully realized, even in the city where the organized struggle began.
And African-American pride is also a source of power, pride based on culture and tradition. There's an African proverb that says, minute by minute, hour by hour. If we lose our history, we lose our power. I'm Miles Hairston.
And I'm Rich Newberg. Good night.
If you don't know where you come from, you can't know where you're going at all.
It's something that needs to be handed down to our children and our children's children, because when we lose that, then we absolutely have nothing.
Our history is one of constantly fighting to stay ahead, stay even.
There was a hunger for learning, education, working together. Civil rights made us work together, help one another.